Partnership for Ashtabula County. It's my pleasure to have Kyle Rhodes, the Chief Operating Officer from RH Energy Trans, here this morning to talk to us about the Risberg pipeline. So I also want to mention Oyvind Risberg, from the CEO and President of MK Energy and RH Energy Trans, Anna Wessel, CEO and President of North Pier Energy. And I also want to extend a public thank you to Dominion Energy. Dan Bowes is here, and thank them because without Dominion's participation as the anchor customer, if you will, in this project, we wouldn't be standing here, I don't think, at this point in time talking to you. So I'm sure Kyle's going to cover that relationship, but it's critical in how this played out to have Dominion participating in the way that they did. So this certainly is a game changer for Ashtabula County in terms of our economic development competitiveness, not only in terms of helping our existing companies be more competitive, to grow, to have capacity to add jobs, expand, but also it's critical in terms of our ability to attract new companies and leverage our other resources. You've probably all heard me talk about our strategy in terms of leveraging our competitive infrastructure assets. And without this piece, the other pieces would have much less value. Our deep water ports, our rails, our highway access, our workforce infrastructure, right? We wouldn't be able to develop those without this critical piece. So it's very, very exciting to be talking about this today and hearing more about how this fits in and how this impacts our long-term development opportunities. So with that, thank you, and I'll turn it over to Kyle.
Thanks, Greg. I would agree. When Greg told me that we drew one of the bigger crowds for this event, I think I can speak for the whole company that we're excited to see that this generates such interest and hopefully excitement for the community. So. Thank you all for coming out and listening to me speak for a little bit. So we're here to talk about the Risberg Line project, named after owner and founder Oyvind Risberg here. In total, it's a 60-mile project running from Meadville, Pennsylvania to North Kingsville, Ohio. Greg had mentioned Dominion Energy is the anchor shipper. We're tying into a system of theirs there in North Kingsville to allow some capacity to free up on their system and I'll get into that in another slide here, but I'd also like to extend a thank you to Dominion and Dan for, it's been a long process, but very happy to have them as an anchor customer. So I'm going to talk a little bit about MK, and the reason we're talking about MK is that's the legacy company that Oyvind founded, I started with. We have an existing system in northwestern Pennsylvania, southwestern New York that we've operated for many years. So I'm going to talk a little bit about MK at first and the history there, and then I'll get into the Risberg project. So here's a slide with a lot of text on it. This is some of the management team, and Greg had introduced Oyvind here with us today. A couple people that are here with us that aren't on this slide are from our energy marketing affiliate, RH Energy Marketing, Erica Fisher and Jim Kuhn. They've been with the marketing affiliate since 2008, I think, both of you. So a lot of experience in this basin, this area. So I started with MK in 2004. My background is in electrical engineering and technology. I started off in measurement and automation and worked my way up through supervisor, operations manager, and now currently Chief Operating Officer of RH Energy Trans. I've managed the assets that you'll see in a slide since 2012, including all growth projects on the system since then. So this is a map of the MK system. You can see all the red and black on this map is the systems we operate today. It's about 350 miles of pipeline originally built by Columbia Gas Transmission as two transmission specs back in the early 80s. So our goal is to find pockets like this one that need gas capacity, that have growth potential, or other pockets where gas takeaway capacity is also needed. Again, like I said, I want to talk a little bit about MKey's history because that's the legacy company that got us into this project. The assets that MKey has are going to be contributed into the project, some of the assets. MKey Gathering was formed back in 1999 by Oyvind Risberg, originally called Norse Pipeline, where Oyvind acquired assets from Columbia Gas Transmission that you just saw on the previous map. They called that the Project Penny System. And then since then, we've operated under New York Public Service Commission regulation, Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission regulation as intrastate gathering facilities. The Risberg pipeline will be under the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission jurisdiction. There was a short time where the system that we have in Jamestown, New York, that feeds the power plant was under FERC regulation as well. So that was a good lead into this slide. This is a project in Jamestown, New York that's very similar to the Risberg line project, where half the system was in place and contributed by Norse Pipeline at the time, or MKey Gathering. And then there was a new build section of pipeline from this point down into the city of Jamestown that allowed the city to convert their coal-fired power plant into a natural gas-fired turbine power plant. And Oyvind and somebody on the previous slide, Dennis Holbrook, had headed that project with the city of Jamestown in the year 2000. So we've been supplying the city for the last 18 years reliably with natural gas. So now we're going to talk about the Risberg line project. And again, we found a pocket up here in northeast Ohio that had some system constraints just because it's at the outermost reaches of Dominion's system, and Dominion can speak a little better to that than I can. But and we have existing system that's half the distance of any other potential larger supply line that could have satisfied the same need in this area. So that's the reason for point number 2, use of those existing facilities to limit environmental impact to the greatest extent possible, make the project as economically feasible as possible as well. And, you know, there's significant pipeline expansion potential. We'll talk about the initial capacity and the ability of the system to be expanded beyond that. So this is a map of the Risberg line project. You'll see it's a cutout of the previous map that I have. The dark blue solid line here is the existing system to be contributed to the project. It's about 32 miles of existing pipeline in the ground, 27 miles of 12-inch and about 5 miles of 8-inch. The dotted line here is going to be the new 12-inch built to the North Kingsville delivery point. Initially, it'll take gas off of the Tennessee 200 line. That's a 26-inch transmission line that historically connected the Gulf of Mexico to New York City and New England. In recent years, Marcellus Shale, of course, has filled up this system, and actually they're running gas backwards in that system now. So, but there is, you'll see, I mean, this whole corridor here would allow any other potential new drilling to replace that capacity that's initially going to be filled with Tennessee gas. Here's some of the data on the existing facilities to be used. There's a existing compressor site already down in Meadville where we're going to have the tie into Tennessee. Tennessee's line borders that 14-acre compressor site. We're going to construct the new receipt point in an already existing pipeline right away. Again, there's the 27 miles of the existing 12-inch, 5 miles of 8-inch, and there's also a compressor station existing today with units on site in the middle of that 5 miles of 8-inch. We call that the county line compressor site. So the initial design capacity today is 55,000 MCF a day, which equates to about 20 billion cubic feet a year of capacity, which, could supply over 200,000 homes needs. Again, Dominion Energy is the anchor shipper. They've subscribed for 40,000 of that 55,000 capacity to relieve some of their existing system constraints, improve reliability, and allow for growth on their system as well. And then I said there's significant expansion capability of the system that, without touching the new build 12-inch section that you saw a dotted line on the map, we would start with parallel replacement of that 8-inch and so on and so forth backwards. Ultimately, we could expand the system to a 200,000 a day capacity. So here's the remaining timeline from where we're at. We were issued our Ohio EPA permits last Friday. We're still in need of the FERC certificate before we can actually start construction. We anticipate that still yet this month. And from that point, we have to accept the certificate, we have to file an implementation plan, and then we can be on the ground, breaking ground. And that process is usually around a 5 to 10 day process, we're told. So, and then once we're on the ground, it's a little over a 5-month construction process to get to first gas flow. It's about a 6.5-month total project with restoration and everything. You can see there on the bottom how that plays out with the schedule. We have contractors already contracted, standing by, waiting to start construction as soon as the permits are issued. And I know that was a very exciting, very quick presentation, but I assume that more so questions and answers are probably what everybody's interested in. So, yes? Correct. Yeah, like I said, it's about a 5.5 month from groundbreaking to first gas delivery. We're hoping it'll be this month, within the next couple weeks, yeah.
Kyle, can you tell us about the right-of-way you secured, the width, some of the challenges, and the dimensions of the right-of-way?
Sure. What the right-of-way width varies. I mean, we narrow it down through resources such as wetlands, stream crossings, to a 50-foot wide construction, 35-foot wide permanent right-of-way. Other areas where you're in agricultural fields will utilize more space because it's there available. You're not impacting resources. Some areas will have a 100-foot wide construction. Ultimately, it's going to be a 50-foot wide permanent corridor across those areas. Another good note, and I'm glad you brought that up, was about 60% of the new route parallels existing corridors, whether that's First Energy has a transmission power line that we're paralleling. We're paralleling rail lines, I-90 for a little bit. So we've utilized as many existing corridors to parallel as we can to also minimize environmental impact.
Are you using standard excavation methods, or are you going to do drilling or high construction?
Probably 98% of the line will be open cut standard construction. We do have to horizontal directional drill under I-90 and Conneaut Creek. So we have, actually also Route 7 is going to be a HDD.
Excuse me, I'm just a lay person looking at all this, but have there been any challenges as far as crossing properties that people have had objections?
No, one other thing that we haven't mentioned, that we've had great support with landowners as well. I think we're dealing with a lot of large parcel farmers in Ohio, and I think they see the benefit that it's going to bring to the community, so they've been very supportive also. So it's been a blessing to work along that route.
What do you peg the useful life of the pipeline infrastructure?
So depending on which division you're in, accounting puts a 40 to 50 year life on it, but there's pipelines in the ground. It's coated steel, cathodically protected. There's 100-year-old pipeline in the ground today that still has many years of useful life left. So this will be also cathodically protected coated pipeline. So.
No other questions? Oh, I was going to say, we got it.
Yeah, I was wondering if there's any direct correspondence with any new industrial users that might be coming because of this pipeline being put in.
We haven't had a lot of direct communication. Greg has a little more intimate knowledge of those communications than we do. But
Right.
like I said, our main communication has been with Dominion. There have been a few other interests put our way. But
So I probably don't need this, but I'll use it just the same. So to speak, the question that was asked, for those in the back, if you didn't hear it, was, has this pipeline to this point generated any interest from businesses that are looking at coming in? Is that fair? So the answer to that is absolutely yes. Before this, even with the announcement that the pipeline is coming, we're already seeing investment interest from multiple companies throughout the county. We're working on a project in Ashtabula that would be hundreds of new jobs, hundreds of millions of capital investment. And the only reason that we're competing is because this was that last remaining piece of infrastructure that we were missing. And we're able to leverage then other key assets. We're talking, Jim, what, 4 or 5 active projects in Conneaut right now that run the gamut of size in terms of capital investment and job creation. You know, on the largest side, it would be, you know, probably what, $1 billion of investment, and another project, 100 new jobs. Again, leveraging key assets that we have, that this was the last remaining piece. Now again, we're on the early stages of discussion, but at least we're in the game now, and we're in the game because of this pipeline. One of the things that I think that is important to point out is that geographically it comes in from the east to the west and terminates into a distribution station of Dominion's and ties into their system. And maybe this will raise a question for Dan, or you can clarify anything that I may state incorrectly, but what that does is it frees up capacity that's coming in from other areas of Dominion's system, and then allows us then to extend, in the opportunity to extend into areas that are underserved today. So take our properties at 45, right? We've got Nelson's property on the north side is about 100 acres. We've got property on the south side. The Sidley property is what we term the Sidley property, is probably another 130 acres of development capacity. Well, the Taco Bell that went in there, if you look out back, there's 2 tanks, right? And they're using propane because they couldn't get enough gas. Now this will allow us to open up those areas. Now, you know, we may have to run some additional pipe, but now we've got capacity freed up to be able to compete for development in those areas that hasn't seen it in a while. And some people say, those are competitive sites logistically. Why isn't anything happening there? Well, part of it was lack of this critical infrastructure. So it opens up the door for other opportunities like that as well.
How much did it cost, or will it cost to build that portion?
So it's about an $86 million project with contributed asset value and new construction and everything. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Since I'm here, I want to thank everyone in Ohio and Pennsylvania, but primarily Greg, Jim, Dan, and Kyle as the primary forces for making this project happen. It's been a long term coming. I've known Dominion for like 30 years then. We talked about this for a long, long time. It took us years to come to this conclusion. But without Dominion, I would not be here. We would not have this breakfast meeting. So I want to have a hand of applause for Dominion, and they're stepping up. And obviously also a thank to all the landowners that have supported us all along the way. We do have, as a FERC regulated pipeline, the right to use eminent domain if it's in public interest to build this infrastructure. I do not like that name. I'm a landowner myself. I like private negotiations. And Kyle and his team has been able to work with each one of the landowners impacted in private negotiations. So we do not anticipate any use of eminent domain on this project, which I think is fantastic. Okay. The other thing is for Greg and Jim, forward site, also Dan Saucier with the Jobs Ohio, has been very supportive. Actually, this is probably one of the best states I've done business in America. I've been here since 1991. I moved to Houston, Texas in '93 and to Erie, Pennsylvania with my wife Ann Wessel in 2011 to primarily focus on finding pockets like Kyle talked about. We built into Jamestown, New York, this pipeline in year 2000, also without the use of eminent domain. And that has caused the city to be provided natural gas reliable for 18 years. And Kyle was not really pointing out what he has done for 18 years. The city has never lacked natural gas for the electric power generation, even at the coldest days. We just had some of those days some few years ago in 2013-14. The city of Jamestown had 100% of the gas needs throughout the cold spell by use also of compression. And it's not only Kyle, but it's a team is put together to do these things. On this pipeline, we will have ultimately two stations. We will have one in county line between Erie and Crawford County, and also backup stations at Meadville compressor stations, both existing stations, no need to build new infrastructure. And that, I think, is the key why we were able to come to an agreement with Dominion, that we have so much existing, fantastic quality pipeline. And there was a question here about what is the life of these pipelines. And Carl asked and indicated that you can have a line in the ground for like 100 years. And it's all about how you maintain it. As long as you have electric cathodic protection and you maintain that, we also have by law to do integrity management. So we have to do very thorough evaluation of the pipeline, each segment every 10 years. So if you do that right, you can have a pipeline for decades and decades. Most of where I do most of my business today in Pennsylvania, believe it or not, also in New York State. The National Fuel Utility Company, most of their pipelines 100 years old. And that's what serve their almost 1 million customers, 100 years old pipeline. So we anticipate to be around here for a long, long time. So it's fantastic to see the support we have had. And I think that ground very well for flexible and good cooperation in many, many years to come. And if you have any questions, if Carl is not doing his job well, I live in Erie, Pennsylvania, and that's only an hour away. Yes?
Sounds like you've had a long, successful career in gas lines. Have you had to deal with any disasters?
Not in the gas pipeline area. I built up 2 public companies actually in the upstream, which is drilling for oil and gas. And one of my subcontractors on the drilling rig was not our drilling rig, but it was a subcontractor. Unfortunately, died. Nothing I could have done about it. It was not my subcontractor, not my company that was involved in it, but indirectly they worked for me. So that's sad tragedies, and you try to do everything you can to prevent that. So obviously these days our industry is scrutinized enormously, so our public relation is almost unimaginable what I can spend of resources to make sure we do not have disasters, because that is a disaster for everyone. So hopefully that will not happen. Any other questions? Jim?
Can you talk a little bit about natural gas, where it was 10 years ago in the region and where it is today, production of the region, what kind of access to natural gas that is really true in Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania,
Yeah, you are sitting on a resource that I think very few can fathom the value of. I started my first office in Jamestown, New York in 1996. And at that point we were drilling what we called Silurian sandstone tight Medina formation. I think here in Ohio they call it Clinton formation. You spent $200,000, you got 50 MCF out of it. Today that entire business is history. So we had turned around in 20 years. Business acumen up here, with lots of mom and dad shops that drill this type of wells. A couple of wells per year, but when you have 10,000 of those people, it adds up. So we have literally an enormous amount of old gas wells that was drilled for a whole different purpose, not for the same, but in a different regime. And that was the time also where US was thinking they were running out of natural gas. So we had these cycles. In the 70s you had too much gas, and then in the 90s we have too little gas, and they spent billions of dollars in the 90s, early 2000s to put in LNG facilities for importing gas to America. And then they discovered, I call it in 2008, shale. And we were heavily involved in that as well. Unfortunately too much in New York State. But the shale revolution, and that's really what it is, has caused America to be, many say energy independent, and you're energy independent in many aspects of it today. But what you have done over these last 10 years is you used to import gas from the Gulf of Mexico up here, transported it 1,300 miles, cost you a lot of money, especially in that cold January winter day. New York City is experiencing some of what you experienced today, because they don't really want any infrastructure in there. So they have even an escalated problem like we have had in this region 10 years ago. But now with the shale, you have so much gas, so we have to revert, like Kyle said, all the pipelines. We used to move gas north, now we move it south. So now we get, from a gas producer, we get the discount because it costs money to get the gas to the market. Pennsylvania state, I need to find out where Ohio is, but Pennsylvania state today is has the second largest gas reserves in the world. In the world. Pennsylvania state last year, 2 years ago, produced more natural gas than Norway. And Norway, where I come from, is the third largest natural gas producer for export purposes in the world. It's enormous resources. And obviously sometimes I feel our industry is not recognized for what we're bringing to the table of importance. But you have, they said that the Marcellus shale, the Utica shale that you have here in Ohio and Pennsylvania, is going to be around for 100 years at least. And it's supposed to be the shale formation in America that lasts the longest. So it's very good that we have a pipeline if it lasts for 100 years, because you will have resources if you want to utilize them for 100 years as well. So plenty of opportunities if we can get it to the market, and that's our job, to try to connect local production to the local consumption. And one thing, Kyle, that we might point out is that, like we did for the city of Jamestown, we allowed them to take gas off the Tennessee line or from our 350-mile pipeline system that moves locally produced gas. Over time, we plan to do the same here. And it's hard to see, Kyle, but if you can point out that it's supposed to be in red. I don't know if I'm getting older and can't see that as clear, but this is the intersection with our existing pipeline. And our next step is going to see if we can explore and connect that red pipeline, MK gathering, to more of the shale, Utica and Marcellus, so that this region can access locally produced gas or interstate gas in any ration or by price comparison they want. So again, we're trying to make this region even more price competitive. The city of Jamestown had very success in doing that, running their gas-fired power plant very economical. That was a long answer, Jim. Did I quiet everyone?
I'm just happy to see something good coming from the east. It seems like New York likes to fill our landfills, and this is something good coming to Ohio. Thank you.
Don't get me going, but I love Ohio. This is where we will be focusing. It's been, I said this is probably the or one of the two best states I've done businesses in America. Maybe Texas is also comparable, but it's a fantastic support for all the different aspects of your politics. to your agencies, enormous support from your agencies, and obviously from people like Greg, Jim, Dan Saucer, and others that has helped us to get to where we are. So there's a lot of people, but mostly the audience we have today, the landowners, the industries that's been support for this project. So thank you so much. I don't know.
Any last questions that would like to be asked? No? No others? Well, I'll wrap up. I just want to echo, some of the points that Oyvind made in terms of, we talked about projects that we're competing for today that we wouldn't otherwise compete for, but now this allows us to change our strategy too, our long-term strategy, in terms of industries that we're trying to target, because we've got key assets that they would be interested in. So, whether that's looking at things like, liquefied gas and other industries, storage, being connected in upstream or downstream related to the processing of, we've got Shell building an ethane cracker. How do we fit in with that? But having these resources allows us to change our strategy and be much more competitive too. So again, thank you for being here this morning and for your participation, and everybody have a wonderful holiday season. Thank you.